The sun was setting behind the sprawling cityscape of Chicago, casting a warm orange glow over the towering buildings. Jake hurried through the crowded streets, clutching his backpack tightly. At 16, he had always been the quiet one, the boy who avoided trouble and kept his head down. But today had been worse than usual. His locker had been broken into, his books scattered across the school hallway, and someone had scrawled "loser" in big, bold letters on the cover of his math textbook. As he turned a corner, Jake found himself in a quieter part of the city, where the bustling noise of downtown seemed to fade into a soft hum. He stopped in front of an old brick building with a sign that read Evelyn's Boutique, Mystical Apparel and More. The name sounded odd, and Jake had never noticed the shop before, even though he had walked this way countless times. He felt an inexplicable pull to step inside. The shop's interior was unlike anything he had ever seen. The air smelled faintly of lavender and old books. Racks of vintage clothes lined the walls, and a soft golden light illuminated the space. Behind the counter stood a woman with striking silver hair, her piercing blue eyes fixed on Jake. "Looking for something special?" she asked, her voice smooth and calming. "I'm just looking," Jake mumbled, though he wasn't sure why he had come in at all. Evelyn tilted her head, studying him. "You're carrying more than a backpack, young man. Trouble follows you, doesn't it?" Jake blinked, startled. "How do you?" "I have my ways," she said with a faint smile. She reached under the counter and pulled out a small, silver bracelet adorned with tiny, intricate charms. "This might help you find what you're looking for." Jake hesitated. "I don't think jewelry is really my thing." "It's not just jewelry," Evelyn said. "It's a key. A way to unlock a side of yourself you've buried deep. A side that can stand tall, fight back, and show the world who you really are." Jake frowned but found himself reaching for the bracelet. The moment his fingers touched it, a strange warmth spread through his body. Evelyn's eyes gleamed. "Wear it," she urged. Against his better judgment, Jake slipped the bracelet onto his wrist. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a tingling sensation washed over him, starting at his fingertips and spreading through his arms, his chest, his legs. He looked down and gasped. His body was changing. His arms grew slimmer, his hands more delicate. His baggy hoodie hung awkwardly on a smaller, more petite frame. His hair lengthened, brushing against his shoulders, and his face softened into striking, feminine features. Jake stumbled backward, catching sight of himself in a nearby mirror. A beautiful girl stared back at him, her wide green eyes filled with shock. What did you do to me?" he whispered, though his voice was higher, softer. "I helped you," Evelyn said calmly. "This isn't just a disguise, Jake. This is you. Or rather, a version of you that can handle what's coming." "What's coming?" Jake asked, panic rising in his chest. Before Evelyn could answer, the shop door burst open, and two men in dark suits stepped inside. They moved with purpose, their eyes scanning the room until they landed on Jake. "There you are," one of them said, his voice cold and menacing. Jake backed away, his heart pounding. "What do you want?" Evelyn stepped between them, her demeanor unflinching. "You have no business here," she said. The men ignored her, their focus locked on Jake. "Come with us, and no one gets hurt," the other man said. Jake shook his head, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "I don't know who you think I am, but—" "Oh, we know exactly who you are," the first man interrupted. "And what you are now." Before Jake could respond, Evelyn raised her hand, and a wave of golden light erupted from her palm, sending the men crashing into the wall. "Run," she shouted at Jake. Without thinking, Jake turned and bolted out the back door. The alley behind the shop was dark and narrow, and he sprinted as fast as his new legs would carry him. His thoughts raced. Who were those men? Why were they after him? And what had Evelyn meant about what's coming? He didn't stop running until he reached an abandoned park on the edge of the city. Panting, he collapsed onto a bench, his mind spinning. He looked down at the bracelet on his wrist, its charms glinting faintly in the moonlight. What had he gotten himself into? Before he could gather his thoughts, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a girl, about his age, with fiery red hair and a confident smirk. "Took you long enough to get here," she said. Jake stared at her, confused. "Do I know you?" "Not yet," she said, extending a hand. "But if you want to survive what's coming, you're going to need my help." Jake hesitated, staring at the girl's outstretched hand. His mind was still reeling from everything that had happened, the transformation, Evelyn's cryptic words, the strange men chasing him. Now this fiery-haired stranger had appeared out of nowhere, acting as though she'd been expecting him. "Who are you?" Jake asked, his voice trembling slightly. The girl rolled her eyes, a mix of amusement and exasperation flickering across her face. "Names can wait. Right now, we need to get out of here before those guys track you down." "Trust me, they will." Jake's instincts told him to run the other way, but something about her calm confidence made him pause. Reluctantly, he took her hand. "Good choice," she said with a grin, pulling him to his feet. "Follow me." She led him through the park, weaving between the overgrown paths and shadowy trees as though she knew the area by heart. They eventually reached a rusted chain-link fence with a small gap at the bottom. The girl dropped to her knees and crawled through, motioning for Jake to follow. Once on the other side, Jake found himself in an abandoned industrial lot, littered with debris and half-collapsed buildings. The girl guided him to a crumbling warehouse near the edge of the lot. She pushed open a heavy metal door, revealing a surprisingly well-lit interior. "Welcome to my hideout," she said, gesturing around the room. The space was a strange mix of cozy and chaotic. A threadbare couch sat in one corner, surrounded by mismatched furniture. A corkboard on the wall was covered with maps, photos, and strings connecting various points. Jake spotted stacks of books, tools, and what looked like old surveillance equipment scattered across the room. "Are you some kind of spy?" Jake asked, still trying to process everything. "Not quite," she said, flopping onto the couch. "But I've been keeping an eye on people like you for a while now." "People like me?" Jake echoed. "You're not the first person Evelyn's helped," the girl explained. "She has a knack for finding, let's call them special cases. People who need a little extra help discovering their potential." Jake sank into a chair, his hands gripping the armrests. "I didn't ask for any of this. I just wanted to live my life without being bullied." "And now you can," the girl said. "But you've also stepped into a much bigger world. Those men who came after you. They work for an organization called Paragon. They're after people like us, people with gifts, people who don't fit into their neat little boxes." Jake frowned. "But I don't have any gifts. I'm just, me." The girl smirked. "Oh, you have gifts, all right. You just don't know how to use them yet. That's where I come in." Jake leaned forward, his curiosity piqued despite his fear. "What's your story, then? How do you know so much about this?" The girl hesitated, her confident demeanor faltering for a moment. "Let's just say I've had my own run-ins with Paragon. They're not exactly fans of people like me." "What do they want?" Jake asked. "To control us," she said bluntly. "Or destroy us if they can't." A heavy silence settled over the room. Jake's mind raced with questions, but before he could ask any of them, the girl stood up and clapped her hands. "Enough talking. If you want to survive, you're going to need to learn how to fight back." "Fight back?" Jake repeated, his voice laced with doubt. "Have you seen me? I'm not exactly fighter material." The girl's grin returned. "Not yet. But you've got potential, and I'm going to help you unlock it. The first step is learning to embrace who you are now." Jake looked down at his transformed body, still struggling to accept what he saw. "And who am I, exactly?" "That's up to you to decide," she said. "But if you're going to stand a chance against Paragon, you'll need to figure it out fast." Before Jake could respond, the warehouse lights flickered. The girl froze, her expression turning serious. "They've found us," she whispered. A loud crash echoed from outside, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps. Jake's heart raced as the girl grabbed his arm and pulled him toward a hidden door at the back of the warehouse. "This way," she said, shoving him through the doorway. Jake stumbled into a narrow corridor, the girl close behind. The sound of footsteps grew louder, accompanied by voices barking orders. "They won't stop until they have you," the girl said, her voice urgent. "But we're not going to let that happen." Jake nodded, determination flickering in his eyes. For the first time, he felt a spark of strength deep within him, a strength he hadn't known he possessed. And he was ready to fight. The corridor was dimly lit, the flickering bulbs casting long shadows on the cracked concrete walls. Jake's breathing was ragged, his heart pounding as the girl led him through the labyrinth of passageways. Behind them, the heavy footsteps of their pursuers grew louder, echoing ominously in the confined space. "What's the plan?" Jake asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Get to the safe room," the girl replied without looking back. "It's reinforced, should buy us some time to figure out our next move." They reached a steel door at the end of the corridor. The girl punched a code into a keypad, and with a loud hiss, the door slid open. She shoved Jake inside and quickly followed, slamming the door shut behind her. The room was small but sturdy, with thick walls and a single console glowing softly in the corner. The girl locked the door and leaned against it, catching her breath. "They're not going to stop, are they?" Jake said, his voice trembling. "Nope," she replied bluntly. "But that's why we're here. To stop them before they stop us." Jake frowned. "You keep saying we. Who else is involved in this?" As if on cue, the console beeped, and a holographic figure appeared above it. It was a tall man in his mid-40s, with sharp features and a serious expression. "Scarlett," the hologram said, addressing the girl. "What's your status?" Scarlett, Jake now had a name for her, crossed her arms. "We've got a new recruit, but Paragon's already on his trail. They're getting faster." The man's gaze shifted to Jake, who felt an unsettling mix of curiosity and scrutiny in his eyes. "You're the one Evelyn found," he said. "You must be something special if they've mobilized this quickly." "I don't even know what's going on," Jake admitted. "One minute I'm being bullied, the next I'm this." He gestured to his transformed body. Scarlett cut in. "We don't have time for a full explanation. Can we use the network to distract Paragon?" The holographic man nodded. "Already working on it. But you'll need to move fast. This safe room won't hold them for long." As if to confirm his words, a loud bang echoed through the room as something heavy slammed against the steel door. Scarlett swore under her breath and turned to Jake. "Listen to me," she said, her tone serious. "You're stronger than you think. Evelyn wouldn't have picked you otherwise. Whatever you're feeling right now, fear, confusion, you need to push past it. We need you to fight." Jake hesitated, doubt clouding his mind. But before he could respond, the banging on the door grew louder, the metal beginning to buckle under the force. Scarlett grabbed a small device from a shelf and pressed it into Jake's hand. It was a sleek black wristband with glowing blue lines running along its surface. "Put this on," she instructed. "What is it?" Jake asked. "It'll help you channel your abilities," she said. "Think of it as training wheels for now." Reluctantly, Jake slipped the wristband onto his arm. The moment it snapped into place, a surge of energy coursed through him, making his skin tingle. His senses sharpened, and for the first time, he felt a strange sense of control over his transformed body. Scarlett grinned. "There you go. Now, let's show these guys what you're made of." The door burst open, and 3 men in tactical gear stormed into the room. Scarlett moved like lightning, dodging the first attacker's swing and delivering a swift kick to his chest. Jake stood frozen for a moment, his instincts screaming at him to run. But then one of the men lunged at him, and something inside Jake snapped. He raised his hand, and to his astonishment, a blast of golden energy erupted from his palm, sending the attacker flying into the wall. "Nice," Scarlett called out, ducking under another punch. "Keep it up." The fight was chaotic, but Jake found himself adapting quickly. Every movement felt natural, as if his body had been made for this. The wristband glowed brighter with each burst of energy, and soon, the attackers were either unconscious or retreating. As the last man fled, Scarlett turned to Jake, her face lit with a mix of relief and pride. "Not bad for your first fight," she said. Jake was still catching his breath, his hands trembling. "What was that? How did I do that?" "It's part of who you are now," Scarlett said. "And trust me, you've barely scratched the surface." Before Jake could ask more questions, the holographic man's voice cut in. "Paragon won't stop here. You need to move to the next safe zone. I'll guide you from the network." Scarlett nodded. "Got it. Let's go." Jake followed her out of the room, his mind racing. He didn't fully understand what was happening or why, but one thing was clear, his life had changed forever. And for the first time, he felt a flicker of hope. Hope that he might finally be able to stand up for himself, and maybe even make a difference. To be continued.